What is going on, Peter here, back with another Honkai Star video, and today I want to be talking about the 3.2 units, being both Castorice and Anaxa. And I want to be talking about if they actually do seem pretty weak, because there's a lot of info going around and a lot of stuff that you can check out yourself. And a general consensus right now is they do seem very weak, as opposed to units that we've been getting, units we got last year, because Acheron was absolutely game-changing. And so there's a lot of info just going around and all that stuff and a lot of discussion. And today I'm going to be giving my opinion on it and just also talking about it. So all I want to say before I get into the video, if you guys find this video helpful and enjoyable, drop a like, would be greatly appreciated. Be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon for future videos like this, along with all other types of Star content. And yep, let's just get straight into it. So first, before I say anything, I want to say these two things. First, this is just going off what their kit is right now and the info going around. It could be different when they're in game. They could be significantly stronger. They could be functioning completely different. This is just going off what's going around. And this will also be assuming that you, the viewer, already know what their kit is, because I'm not going to be going over directly what it is. But first, let's actually talk about Castorice, because she is going to be the main focus and she's the first half, so it just makes sense to talk about her first. So from what we do know, it did seem like Castorice wanted to be played as like a hyper carry character that is going to have her own summon. You want to have that summon deal damage. And you had the summon pretty much act up to 3 times during one summon of that actual memo sprite. You had an attack, you go next, you had an attack again, go next, you had an attack, and pretty much it blew itself up, and that's when you get the most damage out of it. And so the attack frequency of it is still pretty alright. It's slower than other characters that could be especially, but obviously it's further amped up if you're running someone like Sunday or RMC, which is very, very common with her from right now. So you pretty much just got it to kill itself as fast as possible, but the issue is once you did get that first instance done, building up to the ultimate did seem pretty slow. And while you didn't actually have the memo sprite came up, besides having the first thing in the battle, when you go in the battle, you have it up and you have it ready. The other way to actually get it back was by ulting, and that's what the main source of everything was. And so after the first instance of actually having the summon self-destruct, it took a long time to actually get your ult back. And even with the recent changes to where healing actually does give you more, it still kind of does feel like it takes a little while. Because it's not traditional how she does gain her ult. It seemed like you got it from HP draining other allies or herself, or now also receiving healing. We already have other characters that have ults gained in different ways besides energy. Acheron gains it off debuffs. Feixiao gains it off actually just having anyone attack. But having a fast debuffer or having Feixiao just have anyone on the team which is really fast attacking, or just having a follow-up attack which is their best team, there's already ways to get them to get all pretty fast, and that was the whole thing. But when it comes to Castorice herself, she's the main one getting rid of everyone's HP because she's able to reduce everyone's HP to give her more ult charge. And the only way to have your other teammates actually give her some ult charge is to have someone like Gallagher up or Luocha up where they're actually able to heal everything while also attacking, because if someone just attacks normally, she doesn't gain anything. As opposed to Acheron, who could have anyone just inflict the debuff to give her a charge, or just have Feixiao have anyone attack to give her a charge. So pretty much the accumulation of her ultimate just felt very, very slow. But when it comes to the actual damage with the ult, when you are doing the hits into swipe, hits into swipe, hits into blow up, it's obviously very team dependent on what you do have to have more damage. On a more budget team, it felt like the DPS output you did get just did not feel that good, especially for how much it takes when it comes to time, the setup you need. It just really did not feel like it was doing that much damage, and it honestly felt like you could just do like one skill with like another DPS and just cook. But once you got to more of the premium teams, so having someone like Sunday and Tribby, then the damage is still good, but it's still definitely slower than other characters and is definitely lower than other characters as well. So the frequency was already not the greatest, and then when you're outside of ultimate, it's just that much worse, because at least with Acheron, a proper invested Acheron can still do good damage off the skill. Not saying Castorice's normal skill didn't do too much damage, it can, but it's still not as strong. But overall, the output and frequency together just did not feel as high, especially for an anniversary unit. You could also argue that maybe they're finally trying to tone down the power creep, which if they do that, I am all for that. But that would also require the next unit to not be that crazy, next unit to be crazy, and then it also becomes a thing of, can they compete with the current DPS that are at the top? You know, the Herda herself, having a premium Aglia team, fully invested Acheron, fully invested follow-up team with Feixiao. They have to obviously compete at that levels, because then it kind of just becomes a thing where you don't really need to get them at all, because there's already so many strong units and a lot of stuff that can be happening. So if they're toning down the power creep, then it's a lot more understandable, and I will have no complaints. But we obviously will need more units to come out to see whether they're doing that or it's just a caster specific issue. But yeah, overall, I feel like for her frequency, her attack hits and damage are just not as strong. And then just briefly talking about her dupes and such, I feel like her dupes are very, very weak. E2 Castorice is pretty weak, especially compared to what we got last year with Acheron, with E2 being practically the best dupe in the game, absolutely giving you so many more team options and also increasing your damage by a massive ton because of what you could do. And especially with how other game-changing E2s can be, it just feels like Castorice's E1 and E2 just don't feel as strong. And an E2 Castorice pretty much, I'm pretty sure it was calced to be worse than an E0 Herda, which again, if they're toning down power creep, then it's completely understandable. I could see what they're doing with that then. But if they go directly back into having this regular form of where we get power creep relatively often in units, or just stronger units and always have to get best DPS in the game kind of thing, then it's kind of like, why does she feel this kind of weak, you know? I'm not saying she is super weak. I'm not saying she's useless and you shouldn't get her, she's terrible. I'm not saying that. She can still clear well if you really like her, then still a perfect unit for you. I'm just saying for the hassle of HP drain, which if you don't have a premium sustain, someone like Luocha or Linksha, or a lot of people don't have those units. If you don't have them, it's a lot harder to manage, because then draining your HP, you get hit once really hard. She has her own global revive, but if you go past that, then it's useless. You can die, it takes a lot to manage, and then when it comes to her frequency and also damage output, it just does not feel as high as it should be. And I feel like it's definitely something that's kind of just like on the weaker side, because again, she doesn't perform as good as Aglia with the premium team, the Herda. Even with the best casters team you can do, it just with her, with dupes and her light cone, it does perform worse than the Herda, Aglia, all the teams we have that are super broken right now. And honestly, really does not feel like an anniversary unit, especially we did only have one anniversary, but even though we had that one anniversary, we saw how crazy Acheron was. And we've had some crazy units since. We've had just regular units come out and they've just been better. So I'm not really sure what they're going with when it comes to her. She doesn't really feel like it's worth the effort to like have her go. First you have to get her, and then obviously you have to manage the team HP drain, which if you don't have a premium sustain, it becomes harder. The frequency of attacks is on the smaller side, or slower side I should say. And then the damage output, while can be good, is still just not as high as it should be for someone with that slower of an attack frequency. I hate directly comparing units sometimes, but in this case I'm just gonna compare with Aglia. Aglia just attacks so much, and if you have them on the premium teams, Aglia may hit a little less, but the absolute frequency Aglia can get in a turn compared to Castorice is just so much higher, and the damage output just adds up to be so much more. And again, the damage output is not that much smaller from Aglia. Like, she still hits really hard while also attacking so many damn times, which is why she's so broken on her premium team. And that's kind of why it's kind of like, I don't really know what's going on with that. So that's kind of what my thoughts are on Castorice. I feel like she's kind of all over the place. Well, less so all over the place, but just kind of tuned to be weaker when it comes to what she does, because she wants to be a hyper carry, doesn't really have the greatest hyper carry numbers, slow all accumulation. You can technically run her as a sub DPS type thing. I'll need to see more experimenting on that, and I'll have to try it out myself first to have a full opinion on that. But yeah, that's overall what I think on that, and that's what a lot of people also do think. But now talking about Anaxa. So Anaxa is a lot less complicated to talk about, so this is probably going to be a lot shorter as opposed to Castorice. Anaxa is the one I feel like is just all over the place on what he wants to do, because he's kind of like this character that does seem like he's made to be a sub DPS, but he's also able to be ran as a main DPS. He does all these things, but he doesn't excel at any of them. His multipliers are really low from what we know, so his damage output isn't the greatest. He can have up to 2 skills per cast. You can do a basic at the skill as well, thanks to what he does with his little debuff thing. But again, his damage output for a main DPS level is not that high. His damage in the sub DPS is fine, but it's the whole thing of where it does feel like he's implanting all these weaknesses, able to do all the stuff he does, implement those debuffs that he does have, having all the weaknesses on enemies that I already mentioned. It just feels like he's all over the place. But the issue is, originally we all thought he was going to be made to practically just be the Herda's best partner, which I'm pretty sure he is, but it isn't that big of a difference. Like, running him as opposed to running someone like Jade or Servo, the jump is not super big, and the damage he does is just not as good as we thought it would be. So whether you were deciding to do him as like a main DPS or sub DPS on a different team, there is practically no team that he was excelling on, because the main thing was, oh, he was going to be the Herda's best partner, which again I'm pretty sure is true, but the difference is just not worth the pulls right now. Herda doesn't really need the debuffs he does provide. The damage and the stuff that other Erudition's characters can already do is already good. The weakness implant, everything is fun. I will admit it's really fun, but it's not really something she needs either. And then when it comes to being his own main DPS, while he can do that, his damage is just not up to par. His multipliers are super low. And for some ungodly reason, one of his traces give him defense. I have no idea why they decided to give him defense, but other characters are now getting stuff like crit rate, crit damage in their traces while he gets defense, when the purpose of him is being more a oriented DPS character. But for some reason they give him defense traces, and on top of that his multipliers are pretty low, which are nerfing his damage by a lot. Because if they bumped up his damage multipliers, he's going to be way better as a sub DPS. He's going to be way stronger as a main DPS, which which is going to completely eliminate the idea of what you need, because if you run him with the Herda, he's going to be doing a lot of damage himself. It's going to have more DPS output than the others, and on top of that, he has low debuffs and also buffing her a bit and the people on the team, while again having the best damage output himself. And then now that his multipliers would be higher, he would be so much better as a main DPS, because now he'd also be doing the numbers closer to other characters in the game. Because as a main DPS, his damage is okay, but as a hyper carry, when you have even the sustainless where you have 3 other people supporting him, it really just did not felt like it was that strong. So he really just feels like he's a jack of all trades, master of none, which I'm pretty sure I got a comment of with those exact words, someone in my comments in one of my recent videos, and I honestly could not agree more. He is quite literally a jack of all trades, because he does everything practically besides sustaining, obviously, but he's not a master at any of them. Like, you know, the weakness implant on everything, not really anyone benefits from that. He could honestly go off without doing that if they change his kit a bit. Debuffs are kind of like okay, and then his damage is like whatever. So I don't really know what they're actually going with for Anaxa, because I feel like if they did bump up his numbers, change the trace maybe to something useful, and then tweak him a bit to be more of a DPS oriented character, to just have higher multipliers and do more damage to do his role better. Because in theory, he's mainly a sub DPS that also can be a main DPS, but is just mainly a sub DPS, mainly with the Herda. I feel like even though that is his thing, he might be the best with the Herda, but it's just not that big of a difference. And then when it comes to any other team, he's not really the best in any other team. He's more of a suboptimal option, and he would still not be the best other option than one already on the team. There's usually better options, and you get through those better options before you get to actually decide to use him on that team. So there's just, I don't really know what his role in the game is right now. If we ignore the fact that he's going to be the Herda's best partner by a little bit, then I feel like his next best role would be just practically being the hyper carry of the team. But his damage for a hyper carry, especially even if you're doing sustainless, which I've tried a bit myself, the numbers just do not work out too well. And then when it comes to actual investment into him, when it comes to vertical investment, his light cone is really weak, and his E1 and E2 are very whatever. So I actually do not understand what they're going with this character. So they make him have a base kit that's good, but definitely undertune a bit with the multipliers and such. They give him a light cone, which you really don't need because it's actually really weak. I think the light cone himself that he does have is just really bad. Well, less saying really bad, but practically not needed. You could just give him whatever else. For his own DPS, the Herda's light cone is definitely better. The debuff it provides is also just not really that good either. Now when it comes to his E1 or E2, honestly, I could just not have the E1 E2 and I'd be like, it's the same thing. If I get it, it just feel the same. So I really don't know what they're doing when it comes to that, because in his base kit, seems good, it's fun. Multipliers are low, so the damage overall he does do is on the lower side, not really the best anywhere else. And when it comes to vertically investing in him, giving him his light code, giving him, you know, Eidolons, those also don't feel that strong either. His Eidolons are very weak feeling. So I have no idea what they're doing with that, because honestly, I was super hyped for him. I really wanted to make him a main DPS, but after seeing his whole output and what he can do, it just doesn't really feel that worth it. Not trying to discourage you if you did actually want to get him and make him a hyper DPS, vertically invest in him. I'm just giving what it is. Just kind of give my opinion. Again, you might think differently. From what I've seen and what I've tested, it just does not feel like he's that strong. And then when it comes to looking at his role as a sub DPS, it just feels like he goes practically nowhere besides the Herda team, which once again, as I mentioned countless times now, it doesn't really feel that big of an upgrade. Honestly, I'm not really sure what his role in the game is to really be. He's kind of like a unit you can get. If you have the Herda, then I guess you have a slight upgrade there. If you want to run him as a main DPS, it's not the greatest, but still can work. So with him as well, I feel like this being an anniversary patch, so practically both of these characters being technically the anniversary units, neither of them really feel like it's an anniversary thing where it's like, oh, I really gotta get these units because they're super good and they might do this, and that for me. It kind of feels like you could skip them and it would be like any other patch. You can argue the same with other stuff, but the thing is, if we look back at the first year anniversary, Acheron was RN90, gapping everyone as the best DPS in the game. She was insane. E2 absolutely broken, even at just E0 S1 was actually insane. The gap between her and other DPS was insane. And then we also had Aventurine, who also eclipsed every single sustainer in the game. He didn't heal, but he shielded, made you never take damage. You could solo almost any mode with him pretty much, just because you could hit auto and just have him never take damage. And then again, vertically investment talks about Acheron and Aventurine as opposed to Castorice and Anaxa. Acheron gained a big jump from her light code. That's practically a must get on her at this point. And then if you got to E2, it's just that big of a difference as well, just because of how stronger she becomes because of the team things you can do. Aventurine didn't gain the biggest jump when it came to getting his light cone. Still really good light cone. Definitely best if you are running him as a sub DPS, which I always advocate to make him a sub DPS / sustain. Very good for his own damage, and also makes your team do more damage because now he also has vulnerability thanks to what his light code does. That was on the more whatever side that was more focusing on what the actual Lycan provided with the defense and crit damage. But he had a lot more sides. But when it came to his E1 and his E2, it was really good because his E1 makes him so much more broken than he already is. Because now you're giving everyone with the shield 20% crit damage, and also give you the fact that he can refresh the shield with his ultimate, making it to where you never really ever have to use the skill. And his E2 gives him a debuff on his basic attack, which just makes enemies lower their all type res, so that's nice there as well. But when you look at the second year with Castorice and Anaxa, Castorice's Lycan is really good. For E1, E2, not so much. Doesn't really feel that big of a difference. And then when it comes to Anaxa, his Lycan has a debuff in there, but it's very, very weak and is just not really that great. Better options for his damage. For the debuff side, it's very not worth to go just for the defense shred it does have. And then his E1, E2 practically should just not be there because they're just not that strong. They don't really provide a big difference to what happens because, you know, Acheron E2 practically changes the team comes you can do, making her that much stronger. Aventurine E1 makes it to where you never have to use skill again while also giving your team a bit more crit damage, which is great. Well, these two new units, you don't really change much with them, and it honestly doesn't really feel any different. Obviously, they still will feel a bit stronger, but you could go with not having any of them and it won't be that big of a difference. So that's the big talk about the vertical investment part of that. But again, this video is mainly on the base kits and what they do at base, but obviously gotta talk about the vertical investment there. So just comparing it with what we had in the first year is just insane. Doesn't really feel like an anniversary patch. These characters don't really feel like anniversary units when it comes to kit wise, so I'm not really sure what they're trying to do with these two. But again, there still could be some changes. Could completely buff up his multipliers for Anaxa, could change how Castorice works. There's honestly a lot more that could happen. There's not too much time until the 3.2 update. We're almost done with the 3.1 first half, then we'll have 3 weeks with Nide, and then there could be no more changes. Will be in the 3.2 patch, so be in the game. That's what they do. I can't really see a big change to what they will do, so I'm not really sure what's going to be happening there. But again, I really just don't think they feel too worth it. But obviously, I will say that, you know, these might be one of your favorite characters, either Castorice or Anaxa. You wouldn't get them regardless. That's on you. I'm not really here to influence your decision of subbing or not. Obviously, best thing you could do is wait. Maybe they'll be different in the game. There still could be changes coming up. Best thing you could do is to wait till they get put in the actual game, because that will be their final kits. And I'm also not trying to say they're unusable in any sense, because again, Castorice still can be good. Not going to be as strong as other DPS we have in the game right now, but is still strong. You could still easily clear with her. Same thing with Anaxa. You could put him on the Herda team and he'll still be the best. Not by much, but he still will be the best. And as a hyper carry, he does work. It's just not the greatest damage unless you have very high invested in support, such as having him with a sustainless team of E1 Tribby, E1 Robin, E1, E2 Sunday, so on and so forth. And how this also just feels like a lot weaker as opposed to the first Annie, where we just had 2 game-changing and game-breaking units. Now it just kind of feels like a whatever patch. The units just kind of feel like they're there. So I don't know. But yeah, that's the video. Let me know what you guys think. If you guys do have the same opinion, different opinion, just feel free to discuss in the comments. Definitely curious to what everyone else has to say when it does come to their strength, when it comes to their kits. At least what's out right now, because again, this is just all input going around. Do you guys think they're also on the weaker side? Do you guys think they're actually pretty strong and a lot of us are just overlooking it? Or do you guys think they're finally lowering on the power creep because now units won't be as game breaking, so a lot of people will have more chiller patches? Feel free to discuss. Peace out.